Manny Sol, start us off with a headliner. What do you have your eye on this weekend in week 3?
Headline for me is Chiefs panic, relax. Chiefs panic, abate. Chiefs panic, fine. The number one thing that I'm watching for on this Sunday is this Chiefs offense, which, like, I don't know about you, people are trying to get me to freak out about this, right? I talk to my buddies and they're like, Mahomes, it's a bad year for Mahomes now, down year. I'm like, you guys can keep hoping for this. It's not coming. It's not real. You talk to your editors are like, got to get ready in case, the Chiefs, like, if this is a real problem for the Chiefs offense, like, that'll be a big story. It's like, guys, I don't think it's going to happen. They face a Lions defense in week 1 that was very ready for them, right? The Lions were like the most man cover heavy team in the league last season, and they walked out in week 1 and just had like a curated zone game plan for the Chiefs, right? They 100% came out with like a change up that you wouldn't be able to throw unless you had 3 months to prepare for a team. And then in week 2, they face a Jaguars defense that, again, like Lions and Jaguars, they're not known as like the best defenses, but the Lions had a really good curated game plan. I think the Jaguars have overperformed defensive expectations over the first 2 weeks, and they're playing pretty well. So I'm able to explain away some bad Chiefs offense against the Lions and against the Jaguars. The Chiefs play this Sunday, Sheil, the Chicago Bears. All right. If we can't move the football against the current state of the Chicago Bears defense, gave up 30 plus to the Packers and gave up 24 plus to Baker Mayfield and the Bucs. I'll start to maybe a little bit get there on like, all right, maybe having no wide receivers is actually bad. Maybe this does matter a little bit. So in terms of things I'm watching for this coming week, there's no like game that I think is like, oh, 2 real contenders head to head. Like there's a lot of like, all right, like,
it's a bad slate. Yeah, it's not the most exciting slate of games.
I think there's a lot of games where like Titans Browns is going to help us figure out some stuff about those 2 teams, right, both of whom look like they could be good this year. Falcons Lions is the same thing. Saints Packers. There's a lot of like, all right, tell me something. Like this is a good test between some teams in the teens. Can help me riddle out my power rankings a little bit, but there's not a lot of like, wow, the clash, But I'm right now I've got a corner of my eye on this Chiefs offense, and if we're not good against the Bears, they're gonna get half of one eye, and we're gonna keep updating that measuring stick as we go. So Chiefs offense. Let's just drop 35 on the Bears and calm down all of the discourse.
Yeah, I feel like it has to be, obviously a nuanced conversation with the Chiefs offense. Like if you have Mahomes healthy and Andy Reid, your floor is only so low. Like I don't know what your buddies are texting you. I don't think anyone's arguing this is going to be a bad offense, but it's in terms of the offenses that the Chiefs have produced under those 2 guys. Where is it going to rank there? And it's early. It's 2 weeks in. The most likely scenario, Chiefs figure it out. Chiefs have a top 5 offense by the end of the season. Nothing to see here. Remember when people were worried after week 2? Sure. However, I do think it's fair to point out that the offense hasn't played well, like just to their standard in the first 2 weeks. I mean, they've had 96 games under Patrick Mahomes as the starter. Last week's game ranked 96th out of 96 in success rate for their off. It was literally their least efficient game under Patrick Mahomes. By the way, week 1 ranked 92nd out of 96. So it's a 2-game sample. This is why I really should have been like a baseball. I like large samples.
Samples
I
make
wouldn't have as much
better.
fun. Yeah, it makes me feel better, but this is more fun because we get to guess, and it can be week 17 and you can still be like, hey, that's a small sample. They only play 17 games. But these have been, 2 of the 5 worst offensive performances in terms of success rate under Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid. Like, that's not nothing. I mean, you can say, yeah, the Lions and did a good job and the Jags did a good job. And I agree with you. At the same time, like, those aren't the best defenses that they're going to face this season. So I think you're right to say, let's keep an eye on it. I mean, there's a chance that the Chiefs win this game 62-0 and Patrick Mahomes throws 8 touchdowns. And we're saying, all right, they're fine. It was just a little hiccup early in the season. At the same time, they're really testing the limits of what position you're putting those 2 guys in. With this wide receiver core and those offensive tackles, like, I don't know that you needed to make it. You should have made it this hard for, I might have built it, made some different decisions along the way. So I've got my eye on it for sure, but I think you're probably right that it will be much ado about nothing. I'm sticking to that game, Solak, but I'm looking on the other side. What's rock bottom for the Chicago Bears? I mean, this is a team. I know Nora and Steven talked about it this week, but just think of the week and the season they've had so far. I'm sure most people know about it, but a quick recap. Justin Fields has a press conference. He says he's playing a little too robotic. He's got to play more freely. They say, well, why do you think you're playing robotic? He says coaching, and he expands on it. I actually thought when you go back and watch it, he's being honest, thoughtful. It's like everything I want from an athlete. Answer. You know what I mean? Yeah, I agree.
It was such a good answer because it's like Brandon Staley with the angry pressers. You can't hop on the mic and be like, it's cool how great everything is. Like, we can all see you. So you have to acknowledge, like if Fields had not mentioned that there's if he'd been like, me and the coaching staff are in total lockstep is what I'm supposed to do, that would be alarm bells. Because either A, you have no idea what's going on, or B, you have no interest in getting better. You're just going to try to get through this media section. So I loved it. I couldn't agree more.
Yeah, when you watch it, he's explaining what the issues are, and I thought it was great. Like I said, as someone who has sat in on hundreds of those midweek press conferences with coaches and quarterbacks, like that's the kind of insight that you want when you're covering a team. At the same time, it is unusual to hear a quarterback say that part of the reason for some of the issues is coaching. You just typically will not hear that. So he has that. Then he holds a media session later in the locker room, tries to clarify his comments. Then the next day, him and Luke Getsy, the offensive coordinator, they wave to the cameras and they hug so that everyone can see that they're fine. So that's one side of the ball. This is only one thing that's happening in Chicago this week. Then Alan Williams, the defensive coordinator, resigns. There was a mystery with Matt Eberflus, was like, well, I don't know if he's going to be back. The next thing you know, he resigns. There's all these weird rumors online. And then Pat McAfee goes on his show and says there was an FBI, his sources say there was an FBI raid on Alan Williams' house. I don't know anything more about this.
McAfee no one does. On ESPN, by the way.
He's on ESPN.
Like,
right.
There was a
That's
raid.
why.
It's bananas.
Yeah, that's why. So I was like, when I was first prepping, I'm like, all right, this isn't worth mentioning. It's all rumors. And then I'm like, wait, Pat McAfee said this on ESPN. I guess we should mention it.
He's employed by the worldwide leader. Like,
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. No, so you have that. Their left tackle goes on injured reserve. So all these things have happened within a span of like 3 days in Chicago. Not to mention, and I didn't realize this, Solak, they've lost 12 straight games going back to last season. I didn't realize that this was like a losing streak. 12 straight games in the NFL? Like, think about that. Since week 8 of last season, they're 0-12 with an NFL worst minus 159 point differential. So
minus 159 in 12 games is tough. That's double digits. That's tough.
That's tough. They go in
that one.
and like Solak alluded to, now they go to Arrowhead against an offense that's trying to kind of get right here in week 3. What do we see here? Do we see Justin Fields playing more freely? When you and I had shows in the middle of last season and we said, okay, there's something to him. This is an exciting, we don't know if they're going to be great, but man, he's exciting. They can do some things out of structure. That hasn't been there. Do we see some of that this weekend? Do they show some fight, some resolve, some, hey, let's all kind of band together and be a little bit competitive here? Or do they lose 56-0? I mean, anything is possible. And if they get blown out in this game, I mean, I don't know what you do as a franchise. I forgot to mention Ryan Poles, the GM. You never see this, but you rarely see this with an NFL team in season. The GM calling an impromptu press conference to kind of calm the waters.
And not just an impromptu press conference. It's cool how fine we are press conference. Like
right,
that.
Yeah.
Ryan Poles, like Justin Fields was like, hey, coaching is tough. Ryan Poles' press conference was like, no one's panicking. Isn't that great?
Right.
It's week 2. That you shouldn't be doing it. We're not panicking thing week 2. That means it's bad.
Unprecedented. It's honestly unprecedented. It's bad. So I'm going to have my eye on that game. Like you're looking at it, what are you talking about? It's a 12.5 point spread. Bears don't have a chance. And you're probably right about that. But it's funny. Solak and I don't go over these as we talked about last week before we come on the show. But we're both going to have our eyes on the same game there for different reasons. So like you wrote about the Bears this week. Anything to add there?
Yeah, so Matt Eberflus, like you said, 0-12, last 12 games with the Bears. I went and I looked back at like every stretch of at least 12 straight losses over the last like 20, 30 years. It's really tough to find a guy that we look back on and we're like, he was a good coach. Like he just
got
does
it
which
together.
Like, makes sense. Like there are teams that turn it around quickly. The current Jaguars are one of them. The Jaguars had a stretch. It was more than 12. like end of was it? Yeah, it was end of Marone into Urban Meyer, end of Bradley. I can't remember who they had before Urban Meyer. I think it was Doug Marone.
Marone. Yeah, it was Marone, and then
which like Marone was about as good of a name of a coach as you kind of like found on this list. And so like the Jaguars turned around right away. Like Doug Peterson, Trevor Lawrence, bang. Like there's a way to like be a team that loses 12, 14, 16 games in a row and then recovers. It's usually with a different guy running the team. And that's the tough reality for Eberflus, where it's like, all right, you're only 20 games into your tenure at this point, right? Like you have 18 weeks last season, 2 weeks this season. It's like too small of a sample. We should be writing about baseball. But what have you done for the team? Is a hard question right now to answer for Eberflus. Like there's so much attention on this offensive field. This defense is a nightmare, man. And like,
the
Eberflus' whole thing also is supposed to be like culture, like young players, development, intensity, and who's developed? Who are the young cornerstones of this team? Like Jaquan Brisker might be an above average safety. Like that's where we're at in terms of young players. It's very hard to find silver linings right now, rays of sunbeams with the Bears, which sucks.